The topic of this essay is budgeting, which makes it a Part 1, Section B question. And a lot of times we may get a budgeting question with a lot of numbers in it. This one is much more theoretical than it is numerical. But we'll go ahead and we'll start, as always, by reading our information. Sarah Hall is the production manager of a specialty toy manufacturer. The business has grown significantly over the past several years. As the company grows, Sarah has found it more difficult to manage all the various activities of purchasing, production, and quality control. In addition, the accounting department requires more and more feedback each month as costs rise in the growing business. Hall attended a manufacturing conference where she heard about budgeting. The toy manufacturer does not have a formal budgeting process, and Sarah thinks it might help the growing business. Hall is not an accountant, but is putting together a report to discuss the topic of budgeting with accounting. Hall has done some studies on the current production processes. She has found that the company can produce a maximum number of toys each month, but never actually reaches that level of production. One of the areas that has become a significant issue in the growing business is stockouts. Although Hall has been increasing the number of units produced each month, the toy manufacturer's sales department complains that they run out of toys at the beginning of each month. The sales department has provided the following projections for sales over the next quarter. So we're told that the anticipated number of units sold in October is 10,000. They anticipate 12,000 in November and 15,000 in December. These are the number of units they expect to sell in each of those months. Hall has determined that the production should reach a level so that there will be an ending inventory equal to 30% of the next month's sales. So before we go and look at the requirements, this issue here about ending inventory is equal to 30% of the next month's sales. This tells us that we have to produce enough units to sell everything we're supposed to sell this month, plus we need 30% of the next month's sales as our ending inventory. And something that people need to keep in mind when we do this, when we have this type of information, is not only do we have ending inventory equal to 30% of next month's sales, we will also have beginning inventory equal to 30% of this month's sales. Because remember, last month's ending inventory is this month's beginning inventory. So if last month they had ending inventory equal to 30% of this month's sales, we have beginning inventory as well that's going to be equal to 30% of this month's sales. So that's all of the information that we're given, and we have a number of requirements that we're going to have to go through. So let's look at each of these. First, identify and explain 4 characteristics that could make this company's budgeting process successful. Second, describe how this business should differentiate between ideal standards and currently attainable standards. Third, identify and explain 2 possible reasons why the production process in this scenario regularly fails to meet its maximum quantity. Fourth, identify and explain 2 benefits of reducing the incidence of stockouts. And fifth, define budgetary slack. Identify and explain 2 ways this business can reduce the incidence and effect of budgetary slack. And then our final requirement is, based on information provided, prepare the toy company's production budget for the month of November. And we are told to show our calculations. But we'll go ahead and we'll start with the first of these requirements. And as we read through these, a lot of just basic theory here. There aren't calculations in each of these requirements. So requirement number 1 was identify and explain 4 characteristics that could make this company's budgeting process successful. Okay. It asks for, very specifically, 4 characteristics. So we're going to provide 4 characteristics, not 2, not 3, not 7, not 8, 4. If you want to put in 5, that's probably okay, but you're not going to get extra points for it. So we're not listing everything that we can think of. We need 4 characteristics that could make this company's budgeting process successful. So we set up our answer. Characteristics that define successful budgeting processes include, now I'm going to list more than 4 here, and this list I'm going to give is probably not a complete list. I'm sure there's others out there that we could think of, but what they provided in the answer: top management involvement, participative or bottom-up approach, which allows employees throughout the organization to have input on the budget setting process, promoting coordination between functional areas of the organization, providing communication and feedback throughout the process, using different budgets for planning than for performance evaluations to help alleviate some of the behavioral issues with the budgeting process, using budgeting to motivate employees, and setting clear goals and expectations at the beginning of a process. Again, we only needed 4. We have more than 4 listed here, so as long as you have something along these lines, you will have answered this first requirement correctly, and you'll get your full points for it. So moving on to requirement number 2, describe how this business should differentiate between ideal standards and currently attainable standards. Okay, very simple here. We need to talk about what are ideal standards and what are currently attainable standards. So ideal standards, also known as theoretical standards, can only be achieved under perfect conditions. Okay, that's that ideal standard. Everything works on time, nothing breaks, nobody's ever sick. Everything goes best case scenario. Currently attainable standards, also known as practical standards, can be achieved under normal conditions. Normal conditions allow for reasonable downtime, such as shift changes, machinery maintenance, and employee training. Okay, so those ideal standards are perfect best case scenario, and practical standards is what kind of is normal and realistic, reality-based, what it is that happens in the world. And so not a lot there, but we just need to make certain that we address what is an ideal standard and what is that practical standard, and we'll get full points for that one as well. So moving on to the third requirement, identify and explain 2 possible reasons why the production process in this scenario regularly fails to meet its maximum quantity. Again, the magic word here for us is 2. They're looking for 2 possible reasons, and so again, I'm going to give you more than 2 right here, but we need 2. Some of them would be machines need downtime for maintenance, workers need downtime for rest, setups for new production runs may take time, materials machines may break, operator error may occur. We've got quite a potential list here of what it is that might be the reason that they're unable to achieve that maximum quantity of production. Again, we only need to come up with 2 of these, but we've got a lot we can choose from to get those 2. Moving on to requirement number 4, identify and explain 2 benefits of reducing the incidence of stockouts. Again, they're asking for 2 benefits that we have from this. Stockouts means disappointed customers and sales lost to competitors. That's kind of setting up our situation, our problem. Stockouts may lead to rush production, incurring overtime, more errors, rush shipments of materials. When we run out, we have to panic to try to solve that problem. And so reducing the number of stockouts will reduce the losses resulting from the stockouts as listed above. We gave a couple of losses that happen when we have stockouts, and then conclude that, get our points for the conclusion by saying if we reduce the number of stockouts, we will prevent these losses that we just talked about from actually happening. So this takes us then to requirement number 5. Define budgetary slack. Identify and explain 2 ways this business can reduce the incidence and effect of budgetary slack. So we need to start, as the question tells us, define budgetary slack, and then we're going to come up, list at least 2 ways that we can kind of reduce that. Budgetary slack occurs when employees attempt to cushion budgets by either understating projected sales or overstating projected costs. Employees do this in order to make sure they will meet the budget later at the end of the period. Employees may also do this in order to appear that they have exceeded expectations. Budgetary slack will hurt the organization because it misleads management about the true position of the organization, and budgetary slack can lead to inefficient resource planning and poor coordination of activities within the organization. This is a very complete answer to this, and it's still not that long. We've defined what budgetary slack is, and we've given the kind of the downside of it. What happens? We're not having the true position of the organization, and so we're getting kind of incorrect information that we're making decisions from, and it can lead to inefficient resource planning and poor coordination. But we also have to identify, again, 2 ways that business can reduce the incidence and effect of budgetary slack. So business can reduce the incidence and effect of budgetary slack by, okay, we only need 2, we're giving more than that here, using budgets for planning but not evaluation, giving rewards for accurate as well as high budgets, okay, giving kind of that recognition when somebody's budget turns out to be fairly accurate, using additional measures for evaluation in addition to budget success, using a balanced scorecard, having managers learn more about subordinates' day-to-day work, using external benchmark performance measures would be another way that we can kind of reduce this incident of budgetary slack by having an outside benchmark as part of how it is that we're going to evaluate and get those performance measures. So that's the end of our theory question. We do actually have one numerical question, and that's the sixth requirement. Based on information provided, prepare the toy company's budget production for the month of November and show your calculations. Now, this is where we actually get back to that whole process of the numbers and how much it is that we need to produce. So let's go ahead and look at this information one more time. This is just a copy of the information from the question. Our anticipated toy sales are 10,000 for October, 12,000 for November, 15,000 for December. Again, the question was about November, and so we're expected to sell 12,000 toy units in November. And so when we go ahead and we calculate our production budget for November, that's kind of our starting point. Our anticipated sales are 12,000 units. But remember, we said that we have to have our ending inventory equal to 30% of the next month's sales. So not only do we need to have enough units to sell 12,000 this month, we also need to have enough ending inventory to be 30% of the next month's sales. December sales are projected to be 15,000. 30% of that is 4,500. And so we need to have 12,000 units to sell. We need to have 4,500 units in ending inventory. But remember, I said at the beginning, we also have beginning inventory. And so right now we're at 16,500 units, but we don't need to produce all of those in November because we do have some beginning inventory. So we subtract out that beginning inventory, and again, that beginning inventory was 30% of November sales. Because that was October's ending inventory, was 30% of November sales. And so that's going to be our beginning inventory of 3,600 units. So what we need to produce in November, 12,900 units. So that's it. There was nothing really challenging in this question. A lot of good theory questions. We talked about budgetary slack and the standards, ideal, practical, and what it is that's going to be happening in this budget process. Again, when it says 2 or 4 or whatever number of examples it's looking for, that's the number you're trying to present. Okay, you're not trying to present half that. You're not trying to give twice that. You're trying to give what it is it asks for. And when it asks to calculate the units that you're supposed to produce in November and show your work, these 3 lines here, these 3 numbers, that's it. Your sales, your ending inventory, your beginning inventory, add those up, and that's going to get you full points for that part of the question. As we've gone through and gotten full points in every other one, this turns out to be an essay question about budgeting that you should, you certainly can. You might miss a point somewhere along the line, but this is a budgeting question that you would be ready for, and you would be expecting to get very close to the full possible number of points from this question.